agencies. So they all get applications that are submitted to them, and they all have within their limited confines of what they regulate, have the ability to issue, deny, or modify permits for land use within the town of Woodbridge. As a conservation commission, you have things that you may do or you shall do, but none of those things are things where you're actually issuing permits. So you have a different function. You're, in a sense, more of an advisory agency than you are a regulatory agency in terms of actually issuing something so that a person or a group or whatever can do something. So that's a big difference in terms of being a land use agency in your own, in terms of what you can or cannot do. I just want to make a little sidestep here. So for your meeting tonight, I don't know, one of the things that you have to do every year is you have to establish a set of meetings, which meeting dates, regular meeting dates that you turn into the town clerk's office. And that schedule has to include the hour or the time that you're going to meet. And if you have any meetings that are on days that are not listed on that schedule or at a time which is not listed on that schedule, then it becomes what we call a special meeting. And the difference between the two is a regular meeting by vote, you can add things to the agenda. At a special meeting, you are limited solely to that which is listed on your agenda. So this is a statutory frame that you have to work with. All the public meetings within the state in any municipality have to function within a set of guidelines which are set up by state statute. So the statutes govern what we regulate and the parameters we can do it within, and also how we run our meetings, and how they can be available to the public. Your decisions, as much as any of the decisions from the land use boards that I work with, have to be done in public. Your discussions all have to be done in public. So there's transparency for everybody to be able to see it. It's a little bit more challenging with Zoom or with WebEx because a lot of people don't have the ability to always get into that meeting or whatnot. And I have to say that Pua and her crew have been incredible through this whole thing because they've been diligent in recording and posting all the meetings that they have to, tape and get out there for the public to see. So that's been a huge thing. So kudos to Pua and her crew. So I'm not too sure what you want to have me talk about. I don't know if it's better for you to ask some questions. I did send to Tim today, and I don't know if he had a chance to send it out to you, some references to, which I'm sure you're familiar with, but the state statutes that provide the framework for what you do as a commission, as well as the town charter and town code that also empower you in terms of what you can or cannot do. So I sent those out, and in there I also sent out 2 links. And one of the links is to something called the Connecticut Association of Conservation and Inland Wetland Commissions. And this is an invaluable resource for you. One of the things that a conservation commission does, and I did serve on mine up in Bethany, is you have the ability to create a natural resource inventory for the town. And when I was looking at Kakiwik's website today, one of the things that they've got up there is apparently Yukon, through a program called NEMO, which does a lot of map work, has created mapping for all of the towns in the state that has all the things that you need to create an inventory for the town of the town's natural resources. So when you go to do that, click on that link, and right on the front page, there's a link to open up to get there. And it said that you don't have to have any special training in mapping or whatnot. It's pretty user friendly. And from the courses that I've gone to there, it generally is very user friendly. So that's an invaluable tool for you to use, and it's free. So that's a great thing to be able to have. Kakiewicz also holds an annual meeting, typically in November, where they have little workshops that everybody can break out and go to. Because of COVID, they've been doing that via Zoom or WebEx or something, but they're still holding them. But they send out notice of that. Both your commission and the Inland Wetlands Agency do hold a joint membership with them. So there is a reduced fee for any members of the two boards to attend those. I'm not sure if they were free on the Zoom one. I'm pretty sure they were. Um, but anyway, that's another good way to get free information, in a sense, is through there. So I'm looking at Sharon. Hi, Sharon.
Hi.
So is there anything in particular you want me to talk about?
I had a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
Sharon, I had a question. On Saturday, or Chris, sorry. On Saturday, we're going to go down to Merritt Avenue and walk the property. And I was wondering if you could describe what we're empowered to request in terms of a set aside for open space in a subdivision. And if you had a copy of the regulation that maybe you could send us to.
Okay, so you are not empowered to require the open space. What you are empowered to do is make a recommendation to it. So when this application came in, and currently it's only sitting before the Inland Wetlands Agency, and then when they finish their review, it will go on to planning and zoning. Wetlands doesn't have any authority over open space, but it's good for them to know what is going to be potentially required or offered because it affects the layout of the subdivision. When this came in, there wasn't any open space that was proposed by the project engineer or the applicant. And so I suggested very strongly to him that he contact the Conservation Commission, and he did contact him, to have you guys be able to go out, look at the site, and weigh in on what you thought would be appropriate open space, whether it's a trail, an open space set aside, preserving some sort of natural resource. That's your charge, or part of your charge is to be able to offer that opinion, because it is in your hands that inventory of open space, that trail system, all those things fall under you. And so this is where you have the opportunity, when it gets to planning and zoning in particular, to weigh in and say, we would like to see a trail system here, or we would like to see this natural resource protected, or this scenic vista protected, whatever it may be in an individual case. So bottom line is, you can't require it, you can identify it, and then you make that recommendation to the Town Planning and Zoning Commission or to the developer, and hopefully the developer will sit there and say, okay, so that when he gets to planning and zoning, he can sit there and say, I'm proposing this open space, and the Conservation Commission has reviewed it and concurs that this is a good thing to have. That answer your question?
Well, are there any guidelines in terms of what we can ask for, or what we could suggest? I know we talked in the last meeting, there was some discussion around 10% of the property could be identified as open space. Is that in a town regulation, or guidelines in terms of what a developer should do? You give us a little background on that.
So Town Planning and Zoning, by its very name, has two particular functions. It has a planning function, and that's where it comes up with the Town Plan of Conservation and Development. And it also has to review and create subdivision regulations, and it has to process any applications for subdivisions or re-subdivisions in the town. So in the subdivision regulations itself, I'm trying to figure out, this is an amendment that was adopted in 1993. There's a whole provision regarding open space. And that's where it says, any plan to subdivide a tract of land shall include a proposal for open space land dedicated at a proportional rate of 10% of the gross acreage to be subdivided. The location, size, and nature of the dedicated open space of land shall advance the planning and policy goals set forth in the subdivision regulations. The commission can require that the area be dedicated as open space, be representative of the land in that tract. So for a long period of time, subdividers were coming in and saying, oh, we're not going to develop the wetlands. Here's your open space, and they would hand off wetlands. Now, wetlands are a valuable resource, but it doesn't necessarily, in a sense, they're protected through the Inland Wetlands Agency. Some conservation commissions said, well, we want to double protect it by also protecting it. But under the subdivision regulations, what they're saying is if 1% or 10% of a subdivision is wetlands, then you can offer us 10% that's wetlands, but we also want to see 9% that's in the upland or non-wetland area. So it goes on to say that the commission has the ability to waive or modify the open space dedication requirement. So it's town planning and zoning that has the ability to determine what it is and to decide whether or not it can get waived. But it's your recommendation as to what it could be. So sometimes it's a trail, sometimes it's an easement, a development easement in terms of there's nothing that's going to occur in a certain area to preserve a scenic vista. It can take a number of things. And so that's where you come in. So with the Merritt Avenue piece, when it initially came in, I'm aware that the West River Watershed Coalition has, along with other entities, has been working on a trail system that goes in New Haven that's coming up out of New Haven. Obviously, there are trails in Woodbridge, and I wasn't sure, just on my own thoughts, whether or not there was something, because this piece is right there, adjacent to New Haven, if there was something in there that would work for the town in terms of either a trail or, protecting something along that line. That helps?
It does,
but
thank you.
Chris, I have a question. Would it make sense for us to understand what the wetlands is already restricting so that we have an idea of not to just repeat that, but, augment that with another portion of the land, the possible 9%?
So right now, they just received the application in December. They shipped it off to their consulting engineer, which is part of what they're allowed to do. And he hasn't had a chance to do his review, continue his review, because it came in with the holidays in place. Unfortunately, our consulting engineer also had a death in his family, so that compounded how much time he did or didn't have to look at this. So he's still reviewing that. At their first meeting, some of the members expressed concern because some of the lots that are proposed are partially in a flood area, which is different than a wetlands, because wetlands in the state of Connecticut are ponds and streams and lakes and things like that. They're vernal pools, and they're also wetland soils. So it's soils which are poorly drained. A flood area can include those things, but it can also be upland, which are non-wetland soils. So when you look at the subdivision map for the Merritt Avenue subdivision, you're going to see some, there's a legend, and you can see that there's a line, which is the upland review area for wetlands. And what that is where the wetland boundary has been established. The wetland regulations, the way they're written in Woodbridge, say that they can also regulate at a minimum within 100, any activity within 100 feet of a designated wetland. So that line is shown on that subdivision map, but also what's shown on that subdivision map is the actual flood zone, which extends in large part beyond where the upland review area is. So commission members have noted, or agency members have noted, that some of the proposed houses on the lots would be located in those flood areas. And that's not to say that they can't be, because under the zoning regulations, you can build in a flood zone, but you have to build under certain criteria. But this is one thing that wetland members have identified. They've also identified that there's a lot of activity occurring within the upland review area, and within both the flood zone and the upland review area is a detention basin. And they don't know how that functions in a flood zone, given that when the river floods, obviously it floods into the flood zone. So we're waiting for the project engineer to get back to us. So until he gets back to them, they haven't really gotten any concrete discussion going on what they might or might not allow. Or they may reduce the number of lots. Who knows? So I don't have an answer for you yet. They have scheduled a public hearing on the application, which will start at their regular meeting on February 16th, by which point they hope to have their report back from their consulting engineer. Once we get the report back, it is a public record. I am posting it on the town website so that you guys and everybody else are welcome to take a look-see at it and see what the recommendations are.
When would we have to provide input in terms of what areas of the development we would like to see as open space? What's the timeline for when they need that input from us?
Well, as I've mentioned, wetlands doesn't have any jurisdiction over requiring it. It's helpful for them to know because it might or might not change the site plans that are before them. But the actual place where open space comes into play is with planning and zoning. And if planning and zoning changes the plans because of whatever open space they may or may not require, it just means that it may have to go back to the Inland Wetlands Agency to have a revision made to, if they approve the permit or approve a permit for it, to whatever they've approved. So it's helpful while it's before wetlands, but the critical point is when it's with planning and zoning. That help?
Yeah, that
Yes,
helps.
thank you.
And never mind.
When do you
It's-
expect it to go before planning and zoning? Just if that's the key date for us, when would you expect? I know you don't know exactly when it's going to happen.
Well, typically under state statute, an applicant can submit to both inland wetlands and planning and zoning at the exact same time. The statutes allow that if wetlands doesn't act before planning and zoning has to act, that there's an extension of time for planning and zoning to act. However, most developers have understood that it's better to get through wetlands first and then go to planning and zoning. So I would anticipate that they're not going to submit this application to planning and zoning until wetlands has acted. So we have a hearing coming up that's going to start in February. I would presume that it will extend into March with that hearing. Just because, we're going to be getting our engineer's report back. People may want to weigh in on it. The agency members know that there's a lot of public concern or interest in this particular subdivision. And they want to make sure that the public can weigh in too. So given that, I would anticipate that the hearing will continue till March. Once they close the hearing, they can make a decision that night, or they can wait until their following month and mull it over and think about it. So that means that at the earliest, you might see a decision by wetlands in March, but it might not be till April. So depending on which, you're either going to see a submission in April to planning and zoning or in May. It's like a board game, and there's so many rules and things that intersect.
So Chris, if we get a general idea, then we can morph it as we understand what wetlands is going to restrict, and we can maybe get more specific as they get more specific. Is that what
Right.
you think?
So for instance, the project engineer mentioned that there, potentially if a trail was being looked at, there potentially could be something along the West River itself, or perhaps along the base of the Merritt Parkway, going up towards West Rock where there's another trail system and whatnot. So those, it depends on if it's in fee simple that they give the land or if it's an easement. If it's an easement, it only impacts the lots if it's going to reduce the required lot area below what's required for the zone that it's in. But currently, all the lots that are in that subdivision are way in excess of the area that's required for the zone that they're in. So, if something was being looked at in terms of either place, I don't think it would be a big impact on the layout necessarily of the subdivision. But if the map itself changes, then it has to go back to wetlands at some point.
Yeah. Chris, is this a strict?
When they approve when any board, either wetlands or planning and zoning or zoning board of appeals approves something, they reference very specifically to the map that's before them. And that's the instrument that they're approving. They call it the map of record.
Chris, in terms of a easement or fee simple, can it be a combination?
It could, yeah. And typically it's something that's reviewed by town council to ensure that however it's written is something that's, the town is adequately protected by, or it's adequately given to the town. If it's an easement, I know we have an easement on some properties along Ladens River that borders Bethany, and it's not a trail easement, but it's an easement where the people that own along there are restricted from clearing and doing other things in there. And then the town has the right to go in and make sure that that's not happening. So, the easement language definitely if it's an easement, has to be reviewed by town council. If it's something that's being given, then you have to make sure that there's an entity that wants to take it, whether it's the town or the land trust or whoever. But if there's an actual giving in fee simple of land, then you need an entity in town that's willing to accept it.
So not to get into the details of it, but just looking at that drawing, it seemed like there wasn't adequate parking. Like on the street or in front of the units, there were garages and driveways in front of the garages, and didn't seem like there was much parking at all. Are there regulations in town with respect to parking in terms of providing adequate parking?
It was an interesting thing because we rewrote our regulations in a major overhaul back in 2019. And when that was done, it was kind of the original regulations, zoning regulations that the town had were what they call based on Euclidean zoning. And we had a planner who was also into form-based zoning. And so what the town ended up with was a mix of form-based and Euclidean zoning. And there's a table that was supposed to be in the regs in terms of parking, how much parking was required for residences, and inadvertently that got left out. So the Town Planning and Zoning Commission is aware of that. They can enforce parking. Typically, in the old regulations and in the table that was inadvertently left out of the new ones, it would have only required 2 parking spaces per unit. Whether or not that's adequate, that's something that I am sure the people who live in the area will be talking about, because one of the big concerns that I've heard, I've been here for 22 years now, is that parking is at a premium down there because originally that area was developed, well, actually it was subdivided back in the 1890s. And the original lot sizes were 20 feet wide by 100 feet deep. So when zoning was created in 1932, these lots already existed. And they said, well, you really can't put a house on something that's 20 feet wide by 100 feet deep. And so what they said is, we're going to require a minimum of 2 of those. And so that's why you ended up with these lot sizes that are 40 feet wide by 100 feet deep, or 4,000 square feet. Over on Landon, you had a similar subdivision done in the 1890s, but those lots were 25 feet wide by 100 feet deep. So that's why over there you have lots that are 5,000 square feet in area, because it's 50 by 100. That was all fine back in the 30s when a lot of people were walking or using the trolley, but obviously times have changed and people have cars and people have more than one car. So it's tough down there with parking. Whether or not or how planning and zoning will look at that, I don't know. But they are aware of the concerns of the residents down there, and it's certainly something that's been raised by the residents. But in terms of the actual regulation, it's 2 per house or dwelling. So if you have a duplex, you're looking at 4.
But does that include the garage or not
That
the garage?
includes the garage.
Okay.
Chris, harking back to a comment you made early on when you're talking about Cassiewick, and I thank you for bringing it up. It's a site I've been on, and it's a good site. Although today, when I looked, some of the links were not working to some of the resources you mentioned for mapping, but I'll pursue that separately. You mentioned something about membership that I just missed. I just didn't hear it. Does the Wetlands agency have a membership, Cassiewick?
It's a joint membership. So
It's a joint with
in
whom?
Woodbridge, habitually, Conservation Commission in its budget pays for half of that membership, and the Inland Wetlands Commission agency pays for the other half.
Oh,
So whether you know it or not, your budget should have it in there. And
well,
and it gets paid on an annual basis.
Well, the budgets haven't, of course, passed yet, but no one, that information did not get passed along to the current membership of the Conservation Commission, and that money is not in our proposed budget. It doesn't say
You don't have a
money.
membership line item? You should.
Well, yeah, but
I'll look and I'll let you know.
To as far as I could, I don't want to drive into a budget discussion here, but I didn't see any money being spent there,
Okay.
nor know of any memberships that we had, and so that money disappeared for other purposes. Not to say.
Well, I know it was paid last year, so.
Okay, all right. So we'll have to follow up on that. The other question I had before we let you go is just on sort of the scope of the Inland Wetlands Agency. You talked before about looking at some of the ponds and the lakes and the streams. Does Inland Wetlands get involved in subterranean water at all?
No, the statutes are very specific. Surface water is under the jurisdiction of the Inland Wetlands Agency. Groundwater is under the jurisdiction of Planning and Zoning.
Okay, so groundwater being water that's underground.
Yeah, that's underground. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
It's strange, but that's the way it is.
Okay. Anything else for Chris?
So if you want me to come back or anything, let me know.
Be careful of what you speak.
I would just strongly encourage you. I did send over to Tim, and as I mentioned early on, just periodically review the state statute that enables your commission, as well as the town code and charter, because it just helps to refresh your memory. There's a lot of mays and shalls in there, and those mays are, you may do this, but the shalls are mandatory. So any legal questions that you got to turn to town council. I would just note that typically comes through your chair. Chairs are the ones that normally contact town council rather than individual members of a commission or board. As staff, I get to talk to him too. But as a board or a commission, any questions that you have should come through your chair and go to town council rather than having individual members touch base with him.
Yes, and I will address the document Chris had mentioned earlier and the shalls and the mays a little later in our meeting today. So Chris, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for being volunteers. As a volunteer in my own town, and as a scout leader, I have to tell you that it's one of the most important things I think that as individuals and citizens in our towns and state and whatnot that we can do. So thank you and hats off to you for giving your time and energies to serve on a commission. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Bill.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye now. Sharon, thank you for arranging.
Yeah, I think it was.
That was very informative.
Yeah, great.
I have received no public comment, so we'll jump right over that item to the next item on the agenda, and which is the guidance on public minutes. The comment on that is there was a comment in our last meeting about the minutes and that we had, and I may not remember the exact term, but seemed to be like a lot of variation in the minutes. And so I reached out to Betsy Yagler and asked, if there was someone that could come, just like Chris did, and give us guidance on minutes. And she wrote back an email instead and said, and I sent you the excerpt of the email, just took out the text, and then a couple of examples she sent. And, hopefully that provides guidance for us. I know we had put in a request into the budget for someone to take the minutes, and that's still there pending. But if it passes muster and gets approved in the final budget in May, really won't become effective till July. So we have a good amount of time yet to rotate the taking minutes. So I thought it'd be helpful to get this advice and pass it on. Any questions on what Betsy had to say on that?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. If not, no one, I don't see anybody with a question. We will move on to the liaison report.
Kim, can I just make a comment really
Sure.
quickly about it?
Yep.
I'm having trouble unmuting. I think they're very brief minutes, which I think is appropriate under most circumstances. I think if we have a conversation that's complex, just so that we can remember it, fleshing out the meeting minutes might be somewhat more useful. Or even like with Chris Sullivan, just highlighting, the links and saying a little bit more so that we can use them to be a resource for ourselves might also be good. So I appreciate streamlining, but I look back at them and then they can be helpful also to us.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's certainly judgment involved, and there's going to be individual differences, and I don't think we're trying to restrict people and make everyone exactly the same.
Right.
And as Betsy mentioned in there, she does, take down the ideas when there's a discussion, just so that there's some continuity and there's something for the next meeting to look back on. So your point's well taken, Sharon.
Okay, and I just go on.
If I may make a comment also, I've been running into this, or we've been running into this a lot. From a historic perspective, it is very, very disconcerting when you go back, for instance, to some of the minutes of the town selectmen, and I'm talking back in the 30s and the 20s and so forth, to find no information whatsoever. They just said, they passed something or they didn't pass something. There was no information about the discussion or where the idea came from or anything about it. So minutes are a very important part of history, shall we say. And firsthand, I'm running into the problem of minutes that are just plain too short. I understand the reason for it a lot of time, but I think we need to keep that under consideration.
Yeah. I think we have a distinct advantage over the meetings that were held in the era that you talked about, Barbara. You are, and we're. I don't know the split on this, but ours is one of the commissions whose recordings get recorded regularly every month, and so we do have a video and an audio record of all the specific comments, and so that maybe that is an alternative now rather than the real detailed minutes. I don't know if that influences what the advice Betsy gave down, but that's certainly an advantage to be able to go back and look at the video.
Do you have any idea how long those recordings are kept?
No, I do not, but I will find out the answer to that question. I do know from searching around. Well, I couldn't give you a definitive. I know I've seen ones in there from multiple years back, but I will ask two questions: when they started, and how long they keep them. I'll send Pooh a note.
Where are they kept? Where do people have access other than the few that are on the town's YouTube page?
Well, I think that's where they all are. I think once they're there, they're there.
Now, there used to be DVDs kept at the library. Anything about that? Whether they're still doing that?
Not to my knowledge. I haven't heard
Okay.
of them, but sometimes things pop up that I have no idea are sitting there. So I can ask that question.
I think they have them. I think they have them on hard disk.
I certainly will ask.
Okay. Okay. David, you want to take the floor?
Yeah. Okay. First thing is, because of COVID, now masks are going to be required again in all public buildings. The transfer station has a scale, and they're going to make use of it. So they're going to be weighing bulk disposal, and they're going to charge 10 cents per pound starting in February. They're also going to be charging $50 for curbside bulk pickup. These fees are needed to help defray the increased cost due to closing of trash to energy plants throughout Connecticut, as well as landfills. A program to reduce waste by reducing, reusing, and composting trash has proven highly successful where implemented. Typical per capita waste generation of 740 pounds has been reduced to 386 and 225 pounds, respectively, in two pilot programs. There's a $5 million grant available to help establish these programs. We'll be applying for one of these grants and starting a pilot program. The Agricultural Commission had two items that requested to have farm stands be allowed to sell products which are not sourced from town. That was allowed. And then there was a desire to extend farm leases from 1 year to 5 years, which is required to allow for state and federal grant applications. Unfortunately, it's in contradiction to the town charter. The town charter allows only 1 year, and beyond 1 year, it requires a vote of a town meeting. So the town will try to get around this by having the town apply for the grants as a landholder, and instead of the farmers. The Siting Council approved the Verizon cell tower for Newton Road property to be constructed at the end of Soundview Drive. The town will join the neighborhood association in an appeal. There's a community connectivity grant of $600,000. was applied for to pay for sidewalks in the town center, lighting, and thermostats in the library. The American Rescue Plan has $2.6 million available to Woodbridge. The proposed uses for this money include senior center upgrades, HVAC improvement, outdoor space improvement, WGA TV improvements, and replacement of revenue lost to the town. The public will be involved in the decision-making process on spending the money. Earth Day celebration is planned for April. A bike route event celebration of the new bike route is planned for May, and a DOT grant will be available for planning study in the business district. And last but not least, the Board of Selectmen on a party line vote agreed to begin negotiations with Arbor Haven, and it also agreed on a party line vote to reject the offer of the Parks Association and the Land Trust to purchase a conservation easement on the Country Club of Woodbridge property. And that's all I have.
David, can I ask you a question? Is it possible
Sure.
for us to have the Land Trust and Parks Association come to us and present their proposals similar to what Arbor Haven did?
Oh, sure.
I think that would be important. I'd like to understand what their proposal is compared to what we've already seen.
I'm sure they'd be happy to do it.
How do we go about doing that, Tim?
Well,
Well, you're on mute, I think.
yeah. I mean, the two people involved are Chris
Excuse me.
Dickerson and Brian Pines.
Yeah.
So you would contact them.
Yeah, there'd be a guest, just like any other guest we would have, Paul, and, we have the ability to invite guests to speak to us, as we just did. Their proposal is straightforward, but we certainly can have them come and talk to it. I'll reach out to Chris and Brian, who I've met both, and see which one of them would like to come.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Well, I guess I want to make sure it makes sense to everybody else. Anybody else have any problem with this? Okay. And Paul, you understand that has been rejected already by the Board of Selectmen, right?
Yeah, it was curious to me that everybody had the Arbor Haven proposal, and Arbor Haven went around and talked to all the boards and commissions, but nobody's had the opportunity to listen to what the alternative proposal was.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear the alternative proposal. So I do know that I watched the last Board of Selectmen meeting where they decided to go forward with discussions with Arbor Haven. But no decision's been made, no referendum's been had. So I'd be interested to know the facts of what they're proposing and see whether that has any merit either.
Okay. Will do. Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
We will move on to.
Can I just, well,
Sure.
in the same vein, I'm wondering if you'd like me to talk to, because we talked about a couple other people coming to speak, and if anyone wants me to talk to Tony Genovese to speak at maybe the meeting after the Arbor Haven people come, or figure out who should come when, and I have no.
Well, why don't we?
Yeah, we can table that. I just want to put that
table
in
that
there.
for later on when we do our round
Okay.
table, and let's make sure we move on through the agenda. Thank you, Sharon. So we'll talk about the idea that Barbara brought before us about preserving some trees when development's done. Barbara, I'll turn that over to you to kick it off at least.
Yes, I don't know too much about it, Tim. I do know that other towns have created statutes, and I believe I was told that's the way it would have to go for the town to create a statute that would effectively limit the number of trees or somehow have limitation on the trees that are taken down by developers, because in my instance, I feel that there's not much land left to develop in this town. And I feel that developers just wholesale come in and remove trees and just have vacant, not vacant land, but open land when it doesn't need to happen. And I know personally what happened to me was that the developer came in and removed trees for sale. I mean, he logged them, had them logged, so he made money off of the trees and completely clear cut everything, every last piece of property except for what I had put restrictions on when I sold the property. And those restrictions were put there so I wouldn't so much see the buildings. And I just feel that it has so much changed the visual aspect of our town that I would hope that we'd start thinking some more about the environmental aspects, et cetera, and the visual aspects of the builders that come in and then cut the land that they have purchased. After speaking about this, I did hear that it has to be a statute, but I think it's something that I would love to see us recommend for the town to look at to see whether they can do something in this direction.
Barbara, let me ask you, I think it's a really good idea also. But what towns that do have similar regulations, are they planning and zoning regulations, or where are those regulations?
I don't know. I think I was told, no, I don't think they're regulations. I think they're actually statutes within the town, but they may be regulations. They would be probably under planning and zoning.
I think it would be helpful if we could benchmark a few communities that we know of that have regulations and, outline what provisions they have in them. I think it's a good idea, and it's something we should explore too.
Do we know what towns do have those?
Not specifically. I think I did read that there were Westport and or Darien, I think, have them. And I can certainly find out. I will certainly take it upon myself to find out who in Connecticut has regulations or statutes or whatever, and how they've gone about doing it to help us understand more about what can be done, what can't be done.
I think it was Westport, Barbara, that
Westport.
was mentioned in the article that I sent you.
Correct. That one, but I think Darien also does it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, I think that's the way to get started, is to find out, as Paul said, benchmark it, other towns, see how they've done it. And I guess we will have to find out within Woodbridge whether this becomes an ordinance or it has to be part of the planning and zoning regulation. I don't. Part of me says that we may not need to determine that ourselves. That if we can come up with the examples and we can look at them, and it'll take us a while maybe to work through them and decide what makes sense for this town. And we can draft up that language. I think we can probably send that to the Board of Selectmen as a recommendation, as that's what our want to do is, our mission is. And they'll figure out whether it goes to ordinance. And there's an ordinance committee of the Board of Selectmen. And I've seen items referred to that ordinance committee who work on it and come back with the recommendation, or whether it needs to go to planning and zoning. David, maybe I'll throw that out as a, does that seem reasonable? Let the Board of Selectmen make that call?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I'll also figure out, I'll make a couple of calls tomorrow and figure out who we should contact to find out whether it has to be an ordinance or go to TPC. I think I'll start with Chris Sullivan. She knows a lot, and then the town clerk, because she knows about all of the ordinances, but it shouldn't be a difficult thing to do.
No, I think we just model what someone else, another town that looks like us
Right.
has done, and then, you know, with some changes where called for. Barbara, I had one question on scope, and you know, I is the scope of this just when somebody is developing a lot, or is the scope go beyond that to if somebody just has a lot, how much clear cutting they can do? If I own a lot privately, it's next to my house, you know, the next lot over, and I just want to log it. Are you trying to get at that also? And you don't have to answer that question now, but I think
I
that's
haven't thought that through in
Yeah.
my own opinion, Tim. But I can see somebody certainly maybe having another lot and wanting to farm it, for instance, for themselves and so forth. So that is a question that
yeah.
is a valid question. My original thinking on this is because I think it's happens more often is it's developers that come in and you all know specifically the place I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Sure.
Which has been kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back. It's happened all over the place, but that really got to me since it was closest to me.
I think it should apply to both existing property and newly developed property. I'm aware of just, you know, kind of humorous articles of a few years ago. I remember Mr. T, if you remember who Mr. T was, he bought a beautiful house in a suburb of Chicago, and he wasn't supposed to cut down the trees, so he did it in the middle of the night. And so I know that community had regulations against doing it in existing, you know, developed pieces of property. So I think it would make sense because obviously you could create as much of a eyesore for your neighbors if you did it in an existing home or if you did it for a new piece of property.
So David sounded like he was going to take a couple actions on our behalf. That's great. And Barbara, you'll do some research on
Yes,
some
I
other
will.
towns that may have models for us to look at, and hopefully maybe by the next meeting we can look at some of those, you know, as at least on a preliminary basis, just so folks get a sense of what these regulations look like, even if we're don't have as many as we would want to have to come up with a one for Woodbridge.
Excellent.
So are we
Anything else?
thinking this is an agenda item for next month to have another check-in about it?
Yeah, I think this is the type of item that will be a continuing agenda item till it comes to its natural end of life.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I would
Yeah, that
say.
makes sense.
And almost as a segue, that's the same type of thing I see with the trail challenge that Kate is about to talk to us about.
So we mentioned this last week, or not last week, at the previous meeting, but I think that we had also covered a lot of other heady topics, and by that point we're probably tired. And so what I would like from this group is, and I don't know if this is something that we could do a subcommittee for, but it would be great to kind of generate some other ideas of ways that people can earn the Woody Bridger badge besides just hiking, because we want to be inclusive of everyone's different ability to interact with our open space. So I don't want to take up too much time during this meeting, but if you have ideas for that, please feel free to email me. I have a Google Drive folder with all of the resources that I put together this time last year. So I can also share that with Tim, and then Tim can send it to the group. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Would this also include other people from other towns, or is this solely for Woodbridge residents?
That's an excellent question. I mean, when I was envisioning it, I envisioned it as being something for Woodbridge residents. But if we got some super ambitious person from one of our neighboring communities who completed the trail challenge, then I don't see harm in awarding them a Woody Bridger badge. And then if it becomes something where there's more people from outside of town getting them than inside, then we would, obviously evaluate and maybe put in different parameters. But I think what's special about our open space and as being a kind of a neighbor to many different communities is being open with our open space.
Yeah, thank you.
There, I'm unmuted. Kate, I had allocated what I thought would be a sufficient time block in this meeting so that we could kick around some of the ideas.
Okay.
And it may be a way to broaden understanding of what the trail challenge is. Val just raised a great question, something I hadn't thought about, and maybe, with a discussion of a few ideas tonight, it'll maybe start the juices running, and maybe we, when we come back next time, we have even more. I'll start, Kate, because I think I mentioned this to you briefly on the phone, and I'm just trying to find a way to suggest it. So there are a couple thoughts that influence this. One is this is something that could become a burden, running this trail challenge, and I would like to see us minimize the amount of time that any one or more of us have to spend on this. I think it's a very worthwhile thing to do because it brings attention to our open space. So I've stolen an idea. This is not my idea, but I stole this from the farm over on Baldwin Road, who had a corn maze this past year, and I thought the way they did it was very clever. They I guess, Kate, in your I should say the current approach to the trail challenge, people are asked to record in some way which trails they have hiked, and some of the trails can be and I guess were there certain trails in town that were going to be part of this, or was it any?
No, it was land trust property, park association property, and town property. There's some of those that are not as accessible, like they have a trail, but it's not something that would be very usable. I met with the land trust about it. But when I was envisioning it, it was also, you could earn points by participating in a trail cleanup, or if there were education programs held by the land trust or the park association, maybe, one that I think that all three organizations should be doing is the jumping worm. Like that's something that, if we can get people in Woodbridge educated about that, that would count towards the trail challenge. But it's a self-reported thing, because I agree, like it could very quickly and easily become something that's a big lift for us. And so it was a form that people like tracked and could fill out, and then when they've completed their points or whatever, would submit to us.
Yeah. So yeah, and again, my concern was just handling that and having, as if it was going to be an ongoing trail challenge year over year, just the support of it seemed to me might become a burden. So the way the corn maze worked was that they had stations the corn maze. And at each of the stations, they gave you a little punch card at the beginning, and you went to the station, and there was a question there that had 4 answers, and there was a paper punch hanging at the station, and you were able to take the paper punch and then punch the answer to the question on your little card. And then you would go and try to find the next station and punch it again, and at the end you submitted it, and basically the corn maze is for the kids, of course, and at the end they got some little treat for handing in their card, and I think maybe everyone got everyone right, but in taking it over to the trail challenge, I mean, we could in this approach decide each season, each year, we could decide which trails, which open space that we wanted to bring people's attention to, and send them on that hike. And somewhere along there, they could run into this station, questions or not, and they could punch their card. And if they get if they've walked the 4 or 5 or however many trails we think is good for that year, then they can drop off the cards at the library, wherever, town hall, or you can collect them. There'd be not much for us to track, just the setup at the beginning of the year. And then at the end of the season, we could maybe have a drawing, and the people, whose cards get drawn, maybe we give them a pass that we've purchased to the water authority trails in town.
I
So
like
that,
that.
excuse me?
I said I like that.
Because they would, you're not supposed to go on those trails unless you have a pass. These are obviously people that like to hike, so it would be a nice something and you don't have to have just one. You can draw 5, whatever, an appropriate number of passes, whatever. Maybe the water authority would donate them. And to me, that's a family friendly type of a way to do it, because certainly the kids would like to go out and find those places and the punches of the family activity. So that was another a different approach to the trail challenge, and nothing to say that they don't work. In different years you do different things, but
Oh, I like it a lot. And I think as we're kind of all, dealing with right now, I think the more people interact with the country club property, the more that, we got so much feedback from town residents about how important that piece of land is to them.
Yeah.
Well, then let's enable people to use it and
Yeah,
to
so
incentivize people using it.
you can send them to a few different places on that property.
Yeah.
And
I
make
think
sure
that's
that
great.
they see it and what's worthwhile there, and because they don't have to, I guess, be trails per se. I mean, there's pathways there, and yeah.
And then after this last year with COVID, I think those of us who've gone out to restaurants, we've all gotten very proficient at QR codes.
Yeah.
So maybe instead of a punch, it could also be a QR
Yep.
code that people could scan. And
Yeah, I've got proficient with reading them now. I haven't gotten proficient with generating them. That
Oh,
still
that-
mystifies it. Is that easy?
Valerie, you had a question?
Oh, thank you. If we're going to promote a challenge, and I think it's a great idea, do we have any obligation to ensure that some of the trails are maintained at a certain level? Because I have personally, my husband made me go on the Blue Trail, and it was very difficult. I felt I was walking on planks, and I was in the water. So I was just wondering, when we're promoting this, do we have any obligation to make sure that they're at some level of maintenance? I'm just
I-
asking.
Absolutely. I would want to make it as inclusive as possible. So, I mean, we have trails like Alice Newton comes to mind that is very accessible and it has like a nice gravel base. So someone in a wheelchair could get down to most of it before you get to the little bridge over the, so yeah, that would absolutely weigh in. We don't want to send anyone anywhere where if they're not an experienced hiker that they could get hurt.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't have anything else, Tim.
Okay, I didn't know if anybody else had some initial thoughts, but so Kate, you're gonna send me something that I'll get out for next time. We'll
Yeah.
discuss it again and see if we can prompt some more thoughts and decide how we want to go forward for this coming spring, I guess.
I would love to ask everyone maybe to guide our next conversation. If you have a favorite open space thing in town, maybe come bringing that and we can maybe try and generate the list of locations.
Okay.
Okay.
And
Excellent.
you can go to woodbridgetrails.org and they're all listed there.
Oh, okay.
Good. All right. Thank you, Kate. The next item is we're back to Merritt Avenue. Chris spent a lot of time on it. I had a few comments to make on it, but did any other comments on Merritt Avenue before I make the couple I had? We have, of course, our site visit coming up on Saturday at 10 p.m. It's going to be cold.
Did you say 10 p.m.?
10 a.m. Excuse me. I'm looking at my clock on my computer. No, it's 10 a.m. Sorry. Thank you, Barbara. And the meeting's not even that late tonight, and I'm losing it. So 10 a.m. It'll be cold. I do have a little bit of concern because of the sort of rain, snow we got today, and there was a base and the kind of thawing and freezing. So I'm going to plan to wear some traction devices just in case there's ice. If you have some, you might want to bring some just in case. And we find out that it's, a lot of the ground is dug over there, so there's probably places to walk that are going to be okay. But if we get in by the river, it's in the shade. There are trees there and it could be a little icy. So I have a couple extra traction devices. I'll bring them if anybody wants to use them while they're there. There will be 2 or 3 people from the West River Watershed Coalition that'll be joining us. And be a chance, to pick their brains. I'm sure they're going to engage with John Paul Garcia. And I should have said John Paul. I think I said in my note, John Paul Garcia will be meeting us there. I didn't sound like the developer would be there. At first, I thought they were going to be, but I'm getting a sense now, no. I did. Somebody else mentioned they watched the inland wetlands last night. Inland Wetlands Agency last night decided to have a public hearing on the Merritt Avenue subdivision. So I believe they were going to try to do it at their next meeting, perhaps not. Paul, was it you, Paul, who said you listened in on that last night?
No.
Okay, it was someone else, or maybe I misunderstood. But so that public hearing will be coming up. Chris didn't mention it, but I did listen in, at least for that segment. That was all I had. I just wanted to fill in that we still plan to go. John Paul contacted me today, so I know he wanted to verify that we're on. I told him. Okay. And as I mentioned, a couple of you weren't on the beginning. That is a publicly noticed meeting. It's a special meeting of the Conservation Commission, so we can walk around, we can discuss. Those were the two agenda items I put on the meeting.
Tim,
Yes.
in regard to that public meeting, there was some engineering, it was an engineering report that they wanted to have done before they had the public meeting.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That particular piece of land has an old map. It has an old hydrology map on it, which was done before the dam was taken out. They want to reevaluate what the changes would be with that dam taken out. It may change the area of the floodplain. So that work hasn't been done. And after that work is done, then they'll schedule a public meeting. So they didn't give a date for that.
Yeah.
David, was the dam upstream or downstream from the property?
Down.
The dam is downstream from the property.
Yeah, the Pond Lily Avenue Dam you're talking about, David, right?
That dam is adjacent to the Walgreens Shopping Center. So that's downstream.
Yeah, if I recall what was said last night, it was that they'd hope by the next meeting they would have the engineer's report, and maybe then they would schedule the public meeting. So that agrees with what you said. Okay. Okay. Any other comments, Merritt Avenue, before we move on? Okay. Then we're at the agenda item of just kind of sort of roundtable comments from members of the commission and items for the next meeting. I have a few, but again, I'll ask if people have items they just go around. Should we?
Sure.
I don't necessarily want to. No one should feel compelled they have to talk during this. So if you have no comments, it's just say no comment. We don't. There's no shame in that. So, but Paul, you started. I interrupted. Go ahead.
Sure. I was going to ask David a couple of questions. I didn't ask you during your liaison report, but was there any discussion at the Board of Selectmen meeting? Did they receive our decision and our comments on the Arbor Haven proposal?
They did. They were included in the packet, but they weren't discussed at all.
Why didn't they discuss them? Was there any? Did they decide why they didn't? Did they mention why that they didn't discuss them, or
they didn't mention it?
Did they?
I can't speculate why they didn't mention it.
Oh, I didn't know whether there was any discussion where they decided not to consider it. The other thing I was curious about too is I understand that CUPOP had requested that the Board of Selectmen hold off in going forward with any proposal, and they still went forward with it. Was there any discussion about why they decided to ignore CUPOP's request?
There was discussion about holding off, but it was not considered by the first selectman. So I don't have more of an answer for you. The powers that be have the idea that they want to develop this property, and the input that they've gotten so far hasn't changed that view.
It seems like they haven't listened to input. They've got CUPOP saying that they should hold off and pause and wait to make a decision of going forward or not. They have us recommending that they don't go forward. They have the Parks Association saying it's not a good idea. Land Trust offering a different proposal. I just don't understand why they're so tone deaf, and people spend time and energy to try to understand the issues and make thoughtful recommendations, and it doesn't seem like the Board of Selectmen really care. Is there any discussion? I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there any discussion of why they're not listening to all these different organizations?
Well, we put forward those same considerations, and they're just not considered. You know, and at the last meeting they were just rejected. I let's put it this way: they they don't seem to be interested in any opposition to this idea that they have. And you know, even though the boards and commissions, as you say, have weighed in on this, they're not really giving it any consideration. So I think, I mean, I can't second guess their thinking, but since they really don't have to give it any consideration, and since they have the votes to push it through, that's what they've been doing. I mean, we've been pushing it back at every meeting. Yeah.
David, can I ask you, I thought at the previous Board of Selectmen meeting, it was decided that they would find a consultant to talk to them about the best solutions to this property. Did that just go down the tubes, that idea?
That was not revisited at the Board of Selectmen meeting. Actually, we had talked about a town planner, not just for that property, but for the whole town. And that was not included in the agenda.
I hope that they'll bring back the town planner conversation, or alternatively, that maybe First Selectman Heller would go back to the South Central Regional Council of Governments and ask if that's something that could be supported through our membership there, because we desperately need engineering and town planning.
Well, there actually is money set aside for a town planner.
And we put an ad out for it, but we didn't get anybody. So maybe it's not enough money.
My daughter's a town planner. She said it wasn't enough money. What you could get for that money is not a town planner. What you could get is what they call a feasibility study.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which should be kind of like a master plan. But then if you want to go beyond that, then you have to either pay by the hour or you have to hire somebody full time. So.
I tell you, David, I would request that you let the Board of Selectmen know that it's disheartening to spend time on a board and commission and energy for your views and opinions and recommendations to not even be considered. It's really disheartening.
I have a question, David.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Paul. Are you finished?
No, that's it. Yes,
okay,
thank you.
and I agree with you. Are the two proposals, the one in Merritt Avenue and the one at Arbor Haven, are they independent of each other? Are they looking for one of these to be accepted or approved? Are they contingent upon each other at all? Or are they both going to be reviewed separately?
Well, Merritt,
irrespective of each other.
They're separate. The Merritt Avenue project is a private project. I mean, it's on private land, and the Arbor Haven proposal is proposed for public land. So
the only commonality or the only reason why is if they're looking for affordable housing somewhere.
Yeah, I did raise that. I did raise that point, and the first selectman said that's under the purview of the TPZ, so they will address that. And theoretically, they should have to have 10% affordable housing.
You're talking on Merritt Avenue.
Merritt Avenue, yep.
Yeah.
But they take, if you think about it, 10% affordable housing is not going to move the needle at all, because it doesn't change the equation. So if you have 30 houses and you have 3 of them are affordable, it doesn't change the percentage of affordable housing that you have in the town.
It makes no difference at all to
That makes no
the,
difference
It,
whatsoever.
it goes backwards sometimes.
yeah, I mean, look, if you look at the Arbor Haven
The Arbor
proposal,
Haven one makes it go backwards.
yeah, it goes in the wrong direction, in fact.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay, all right, continuing with the roundtable. Anybody else, general comments, items?
Well, I can say, unfortunately, I don't have video, so I can't show it, but I think that I might even bring it on Saturday, but I'm in receipt of a report of the Woodridge Conservation Commission from April 1965. And it's a fascinating book that has been given to me. Some of the same things are being considered still. But I just thought it was wonderful. One of the town residents gave it to me. It will probably end up in the archives of the Historical Society, but meanwhile, I think the Conservation Commission should certainly be able to look at it and review it and so forth.
Hmm.
Tim, I'd ask for the next meeting, if we wind up having this presentation by the Parks Association and the Land Trust, that we also set aside some time either at that meeting or the following, or the next meeting, to discuss the proposal, so we have some time to consider it also.
Okay. Noted. Hmm. Okay, all right. Anybody else, general comments? Okay, I just had a couple, the 7 PM, while we're meeting virtually, 7 PM seems okay going on. I'm not gonna poll everybody every time. but-
I have a question about that. Does that mean at the meetings, we can't add any agenda items though?
That is the downside, and it was gonna be the next thing out of my mouth. I will try to clarify.
Maybe
the
we
diff-
can put something in it at each meeting, like miscellaneous. Or, something where it allows us to add something, because I think things come up in a meeting and making everyone a special meeting and then not being able to add anything at each meeting. We only have a meeting
Yeah.
once a month might be, I'm not that attached to it being 7 or 7:30 personally.
I mean, the start time to me doesn't make a difference either. But, if there is a topic that we don't have in the agenda we want to add, I think it's important to be able to do that. So I don't know if we can modify our entire schedule to be 7 o'clock and not make it a special meeting, so we can add
Yeah.
things to the agenda and have that flexibility. That would be ideal. I don't know if that's possible or not, but if not,
Well-
I would keep it at 7:30, just because there are going to be instances where we do want to add to the agenda, and I think that's an important thing to be able to do.
I agree with Paul.
Yeah,
And
Yeah,
Barbara, isn't it easier for you to do 7:30 than 7 too?
I have been given a reprieve and I no longer have to work on Thursday nights. So I
Oh.
can
Yay.
meet anytime after
Okay.
5.
all right, that's good news, Barbara. We when we go back to in-person meetings, then the 7 o'clock start time becomes a conflict with the Board of Finance, who meets at I don't remember if it's 5:30. I think it might be. And there was concern that they meet in the same room we do at Town Hall. And that is why our meeting started at 7:30, to give time for them to clear. And we'll, as we go into the spring, that will be their busy time, and their more lengthier meetings. A lot of times they're out of there by 6 or 6:30, and it's not a problem. But so that's why it's a 7:30 start time normally if we're in person, and why 7
Tim,
works
A
for
lot of
virtual.
meetings, like Wetlands was always 7:30, so I'm not sure why we need to, I'm up at 7:30. I'm not.
Yeah, no, well, it was a consideration because we were going late. How about if I do this? It sounds like, and I share the concern about having them be special meetings. if I determine that we can have it at 7 and be a regular meeting, it sounds like we can do that while we're virtual. If it will be a special meeting, then we'll switch back to 7:30. Is that the sense I'm getting from the majority? I know Kate, you like 7, but
I'll live. It's okay. 7:30. Fine.
Yep. Okay. So let me try to reconcile that conflict of information that I got. It was too late in the game for me to try to run that down for this time, and so I made it a special meeting. Not the agenda I sent you, but I had to repost another one and ask them to double check it, but I haven't heard back. So I will run that down and we'll be 7:30 regular or 7 regular, depending what I find out. Okay. The other item, well, 2 other items. Some of you with better memories than I have will remember that in the past, there has been an agenda item that I called shalls and mays. Chris referred to that as she was talking today. Those come out, the shalls and mays for the Conservation Commission comes out of the state regulations, the general statutes. And I had promised that I had extracted those from the statutes and listed them out. And I had promised that I would share them at some time, and I'd plan to do it next week. Chris's comments were a good segue for that. And so I'll bring that as an agenda item next time, and also bring forward the links and so forth that Chris had sent with that. The second item that I wanted to mention, I'm hoping that next time we can start to get back to one of the objective that's next on our greater list of objectives. We get back to the greenway extensions. And so I will probably in the materials let me stop that for a second and say I have, since we've talked about it last, been able to get from the state the application that was made by the town of Woodbridge in, I think, late 2001 for the Woodbridge Greenway, and it contained a description of the Woodbridge Greenway. So I will be probably with the materials for next meeting. I'll send that out to everybody. It is in effect the open space plan from the year 2000, and it contains a description of the proposed greenway. The state recognized the greenway in 2002, and so we're in the 20-year anniversary of the greenway, and I think it sounds most appropriate that we look at issuing an update of that the greenway and our proposed extensions for that. So we'll begin to talk about that again, hopefully next week or next meeting, and that will extend, of course, for multiple meetings after that. So I think we have a few items that are going to be recurring as we go forward, and we'll get some regularity perhaps in the agenda. All right, any final comments? Okay, last item of substance is to approve the couple of minutes. For these, we need to take a vote. So Paul, I made a list of everybody on the commission. I'm gonna try to do this in the same order for both sets of minutes. So if you wanna make a little matrix just to record the vote. So let's start with the minutes of 12/22. I will move that we adopt the minutes as written for 12/22.
I have a question. Who wrote those minutes?
I did.
Okay. So I think should the person who wrote them have their name on them?
I didn't see that in Betsy's suggestion, but maybe she did that and just didn't say it.
I think it would be good for us to,
could
since
be
we
on-
all rotate, I think it would be good for us to know who wrote them.
Okay, not a bad point. So maybe Paul, you make a note in the minutes that the 7/22, or excuse me, the 12/22/2021 mittens were recorded by Tim Austin. But actually, we're in a discussion of the minutes and we haven't taken a second for adopting them. So there's a motion on the table to adopt. Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you. Well, and any other further discussion? So we'll do a roll call. Just I think that's pro forma. Seems to be pro forma during the virtual meetings. So please vote aye or nay. Barbara?
Aye.
Diana is not here. Kate?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Okay. Sharon?
Aye.
Val?
Aye.
And Tim is an aye. Okay, thank you. The next set of minutes are the minutes of November 18th. So I'll motion that we adopt the minutes as written. There a second?
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Discussion? Hearing no discussion, we will move to the vote.
Can I just ask something? I guess
Sure.
the point Sharon made just a moment ago.
Oh,
I
yes.
think Valerie wrote those minutes, so maybe we should
Yes.
indicate she was the one that wrote them.
Thank you, Paul. Good catch.
Thank you, Bob.
And in the future, just as a comment, I guess we who take the minutes, or whoever takes the minutes can just note down recorded by at the bottom or appropriately. Okay. So without any other comments, we'll take the vote. Barbara?
Aye.
Diana's absent. Kate?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
Val?
Aye.
And Tim is an aye, and the motion passes. Okay.
So I have another question though. I think in other meetings, the minutes are always done at the beginning of the meeting, and I'd rather do that because my mind is a little clearer at the beginning of a meeting, and if I've thought of anything, I will have that on my mind. So I'm just wondering how other people feel about that, because I think it's a better kind of format.
Yeah.
Fine with me.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, when I think about it, I say, a lot of substantive things we try to get done at the meetings, and sometimes we go long, and that's one of the things that I feel at times we can sacrifice to the time we spend on approving the minutes. It's important to get them written properly and available for the public. But with the final approval, since it's often, as we just did, just a roll call where everybody is an aye, is something I thought we could sacrifice. And that's why I tend to put them towards the end. And I've seen it done both ways and sometimes in the middle. So,
But the reason I think that if we have something that we disagree on, it's good to have clarified it at the beginning of the meeting, so then we get everyone's reality in alignment for the end of them, for the topics that might be reoccurring.
Perhaps that's something that we can do, but not on nights when we have a guest. I just feel like it would be more respectful of when we have speakers come to not have them sit through that.
Well, I was thinking of after the guest, but yeah.
okay. Yeah, Sharon, it's not something of extreme importance, and I'm hoping that we as a group can do a little better and maybe me in particular. And if we only have one set of minutes per meeting to approve, that's a very short. Right, so I'll try to do that. I don't have any objection to that. We are, besides, Paul, of course, will write up these minutes, but we have one other set of some minutes to approve that just hasn't been submitted yet. So we will hopefully have that for next time and have both Paul's and that set. Okay. And with that, we've come to the end of the agenda. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
I
I
second it.
second.
And there's a non-debatable motion, as I hear people say. We are adjourned at 8:38.